Welcome into First in North. The NFL draft is over, so all of the speculation is put to the side, and now we turn our focus into development and how the rookies will change each team's 2024 season. I'm Cassie Carlson, joined by Dan Miller from Fox 2 in Detroit, Ahmad Hicks from Fox 9 in Minneapolis, and Lily Zhao from Fox 6 in Milwaukee. And guys, I'm excited to discuss the draft from this past weekend. And Dan, I want to go to you first. First off, credit to Detroit for hosting the draft and setting the attendance record, more than 775,000 people over the 3 days. I give you the floor to brag about your city.
You know what? I can remember 4 years ago, I was at an event. Roger Goodell was in town. I was on stage with the Lions team president, Rod Wood, and Rod was kind of joking with the commissioner, hey, we'd love to host the draft. And, you know, there were conversations that went on from then. A lot of work went into the bid to finally, 2 years ago, have it announced that Detroit would get the draft, and then an incredible amount of work began just to get everything in place to host 775,000 people and to bring one of the biggest events in all of sports to Detroit. And you know what? I think everybody here is just so proud of the way things went, not just the attendance numbers, but the way they handled the crowd, the way the city looked, you know, to millions and millions of people that watched across the country. It was just really a great weekend for Detroit. It was a two-pronged thing, as we're all in the news business. It was the city of Detroit hosting this, and then there was the story we cover every year, which is the draft and the Lions trying to get better. But it was a really, really positive moment for Detroit, and one that they hope sets them up for other big events going forward. And now Green Bay's on the clock because we're coming your way next year.
Well, I know that Detroit has a lot of pride in their Lions, but I do want to start with the Chicago Bears because they were the first ones on the clock with the #1 overall pick, and obviously they drafted Caleb Williams. We were all expecting this for a long time here in Chicago, but now that it's finally here, and to get a sense of the excitement and what it actually means to the city, he broke Caitlin Clark's draft night merch sales record, and he said he had Bears fans to thank for that. Ryan Poles first started paying close attention to Williams after a Texas-Oklahoma game in 2021. He knew he wanted to draft him after his top 30 visit early in April, and Williams was expecting this for the last 12 years. He's been preparing for this moment, so he said he watched way more Bears games this past season than ever before, and obviously there's excitement for that. But then pair that with the Bears surrounding him with even more weapons, selecting Washington wide receiver Rome Odunze with their second first-round pick. Not overcomplicating things, which the Bears typically do, taking the two best players available and bolstering their offense. And Ryan Poles said if you were to tell him he'd wind up with those two a couple weeks ago, he would tell you are absolutely crazy. His assistant GM, Ian Cunningham, had to hold him back from trading up to get Odunze, who was a big body receiver, led the NCAA in receiving yards last year, set several school records, and now is joining what is, we consider, a stacked wide receiver room, pairing him with DJ Moore and also Keenan Allen, who he can learn from. Ryan Poles called this an impact draft for the Bears. They took huge strides forward. And Ahmad, I want to go to you now because I think the Bears were the winners of the draft, in my opinion, but the Vikings also nailed it. They trade up to take quarterback J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. He's also a Chicagoland guy. And then trade up again to select pass rusher Dallas Turner out of Alabama. What's been the reaction to those moves in Minneapolis?
Well, you know, people here in Minneapolis, they can tend to overthink or, you know, celebrate a little bit too early. So after those first initial draft picks in the first round, some fans were already talking about Super Bowl in the next couple of years. That's how high they are on J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner. The thing I loved about general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah for the Minnesota Vikings, he did not mortgage the future, essentially, to go up and go get J.J. McCarthy. Everyone had the Vikings giving up not only their 11th overall pick, but the number 23 overall pick to go get a quarterback. Instead, all they had to do was move up one with the New York Jets, gave up a couple of late round picks in this year's draft to get their guy in J.J. McCarthy, and then they just swapped picks with the Jacksonville Jaguars, going from 23 to 17 to move up and get one of the best edge rushers in college football this past season, and Dallas Turner. Brian Flores joked the other day when he sat down to meet his new edge rusher in Dallas Turner, and he said, dude, I didn't think we were going to get you. I had no idea you would still be on the board. So I think the Vikings hit a home run in the first round. They got somebody to replace Danielle Hunter and go on the opposite side of Jonathan Grenard, and they also went and got their quarterback, which we all know he may not have to start this year because there's still Sam Darnold on the roster. So overall, home run for the Vikings draft, you know, but I still don't think that they're Super Bowl contenders just yet, like some fans here in Minneapolis tend to believe.
We're talking Super Bowl in Chicago, too. We all love to overreact to all these draft picks. And you mentioned Dallas Turner. A lot of Bears fans were hoping he would still be on the board and maybe someone the Bears would take, but people thought thought maybe he would go to Atlanta at 8th just before that Bears pick, and obviously that was an interesting move they made. Lily, I want to go to you. The Packers with a ton of draft capital, 11 total picks. I know there's some fans who wanted them to take Iowa cornerback Cooper DeJean. They draft a lineman instead, taking Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. Why this direction in the first round?
Well, I think, the Packers didn't really make a lot of sexy picks, and I think that kind of comes with the fact that they have a solid foundation and they have a good starting quarterback in Jordan Love. And when you're going to mortgage your future with Jordan Love, who is eventually going to get that contract extension, you want to protect him up front. And that's exactly why Brian Gutekunst, the Packers GM, selected Jordan Morgan, an offensive lineman out of Arizona. He wanted a big body up front. They draft 2 more offensive linemen in the draft as well. So they want to protect their future at quarterback in Jordan Love. So that's exactly what they did. But this team also got better on the defensive side of the football. We're talking about an offense that really found their groove with Jordan Love and his really young wide receivers and the tight ends. And, they do draft a running back as well. But the defensive side of the football really was kind of what Gutekunst really wanted to focus on. He got their new defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, a lot of new pieces to work with. They retooled the safety room. They bring in competition at linebacker. And, of course, they're getting better on the back end, and that's exactly what this Packers team wanted to do. So, again, while there weren't any big flashy names or sexy picks, as you could say, this team as a whole got a lot better, and they're also talking about Super Bowl as well. So it's going to be a really fun division to talk about this year just to see how the quarterback picks really pan out. But I think Green Bay, when they have their guy in Jordan Love and they bring in pieces to fortify a good defense around him, they also want to be in that Super Bowl discussion as well. And I will say this, though, about the draft coming to Green Bay next year. Dan, we have a lot to live up to in Wisconsin for how Detroit handled it. And with 700,000 people coming to town, that's about 7 times the population of Green Bay. So it'll be interesting to see how many people do make their way to Wisconsin.
Yeah, start booking your hotel rooms like yesterday. Yeah. So now that I'm hearing this from everyone, there are 4 teams in the division who have Super Bowl expectations, whether they are realistic or not, because, Dan, I know the Lions are itching to get there as they were so close just a year ago. They trade up in the first round to draft cornerback Terrion Arnold out of Alabama. They add another in the second with Ennis Rakestraw Jr. Give credit to Brad Holmes for how he's built this team over the years. What did you think of the approach and focus on the secondary this year?
Yeah, let me just say this to Lily. Lily, throw open the doors and they will come. I honestly believe that. I mean, they're just the NFL Shield, the NFL Draft. They will be making the pilgrimage to Green Bay, and there will be a great crowd. You guys will do a great job with it, and it's just such a cool event. So get ready because they're coming. Cassie, I think this. Look, the way this draft started with 14 players coming off the board, offensive players to start, I think the Lions kind of perked up a little bit and said some of these defensive players are starting to get pushed down. And as they did, there were certainly some guys that they had identified that they liked. And Brad Holmes, who I think went into the draft thinking, I'm going to trade up and get one of these guys, then I think really perked up because he didn't have to maybe go up as far as he thought he had to, only going up to 24 with Dallas. But they had Terrion Arnold as the number 1 corner on their board. And this is a guy that comes in at a position of need. If you go back to the end of last year and you look at what Justin Jefferson did to the Lions, what CeeDee Lamb did to the Lions, what Puka Nacua did to the Lions, what Mike Evans did to the Lions, these guys lit them up. They needed to improve that secondary. They thought they did last year, but injuries and other issues took away from what they thought they had in the secondary, so you kind of had to start all over, remodel that room. I think they were thrilled that Rakestraw was still there. I don't think they went into this draft in any way, shape, or form thinking that they were going to go cornerback, but I think when that pick popped up, Rakestraw was still there. I think the difference between him and the next guy down was so significant. They said, we're going corner. We're not going to worry about it. We'll put these guys in a room and see what they can ultimately do. And Brad Holmes' thinking, guys, is this because – we have people, I'm sure you have people talking to you about, well, why didn't they draft something else? They had 2 corners, they had needs. He doesn't look at needs. He looks at the best football player and figures it out later. And there's something to be said for that with the way he explains it. If you have a cornerback up here and maybe a defensive end who's down here, well, if you draft this guy and he's not good enough to help your football team, you're not helping yourself. Get the best players you can. I think that's something that ultimately pays off. And to your point, look, I think this is a heck of a division. I think it was better last year than anybody thought it was going to be. And, yeah, the Lions were 30 minutes from getting there this last year. That left a mark. They want to get back there this season.
All right, well, Dan, you just mentioned that a defensive player wasn't taken off the board until the 15th pick, and that's pretty crazy to think about. But 5 quarterbacks taken in the top 10, in large part thanks to the Falcons, with the most head-scratching move of the entire draft, taking Michael Penix at 8. Ahmad, there's rooting interest in McCarthy here because he's obviously from the western suburbs of Chicago. How will they handle McCarthy's transition to starter?
Well, you know, the thing that we all kind of love and hate about the National Football League, it's a what can you do for me now? And I think the one person who's like kind of looking at this pick and like scratching his head, Sam Darnold, because he knows he's here for just a bridge year. He's here for just one season. And if he plays poorly for 4 to 5 weeks, everyone is going to want to see J.J. McCarthy. But the Vikings have pretty much come out and said all along, they're not going to rush his progression. They want him to take his time before he gets out on the field, before he's ready, and everyone picks up on his flaws. I really do think this is a long-term play, and I really do think that Sam Darnold may flourish this year with the Vikings. He's never had this many skilled playmakers around him when you think about the New York Jets and the Carolina Panthers team. So I know a lot of people here are high on J.J. McCarthy. They expect the world from him, but I don't think they're rushing him right now. That is until the Vikings, you know, maybe go on a roller coaster run, lose a couple of games, and then all fans get impatient and want to see the backup until the backup gets in, and then the backup's not better than the starter. You guys know how that goes.
We know all too well. Hey, what was Justin Jefferson's reaction to the pick?
Justin was thrilled about it. He texted him right away. He said that confidence is key in this league, which I think we all know. And he said there will be no confusion moving forward. He said you can go by JJ, I will go by Jets. So it seems like everything will be just fine. And Justin Jefferson said after the Detroit Lions game last season, it does not matter who's throwing him the ball. He has a pretty big catch radius. As long as they're confident in getting the ball his way, he'll make it happen. So I don't think he's bothered by this one bit.
And that's what people are wondering with J.J. McCarthy is, can his passing game translate to the NFL? All right, the Bears only had 4 picks going into the draft. They end up adding a 5th, but GM Ryan Poles felt good about having just 4 because of the work they did in free agency. And last year at the trade deadline, bringing in Montez Sweat for essentially a 2nd-round pick. They had 2 cool stories coming out of this one with their 3rd-round pick, Hiran Amagaji, an offensive tackle out of Yale who grew up in Chicago in a suburb called Hinsdale. He had a run-in with head coach Matt Eberflus at Kemper Lakes Golf Course last year where he told him that the Bears were going to draft him, and Eberflus kind of just shook it off and said, like, okay, yeah, we'll look at the tape. And then a year later, he gets the call that he'll be a Bear. Where he plays, still TBD, still a raw talent, has experience at guard and tackle, and Ryan Poles said he could be either a swing tackle and potentially work his way into competition for left tackle. But another cool story, in the 4th round, the Bears take a punter, and I know Lou mentioned this last week. They draft Iowa punter Torrey Taylor, and if you know anything about Iowa, he was essentially their best weapon on offense. Set the single-season record for most punt yards with nearly 4,500. He averaged 48 yards per punt, pinned 32 inside the 20, and the Bears had some of the worst punting stats in the league last year. So this is a huge upgrade from Trenton Gill, but I also love that Taylor said he got a text from Caleb Williams saying, hey, I know you were needed a lot at Iowa. We won't be needing you very much next year. I love that confidence. Lily, I know the Packers won with the youngest team in the league last year. After losing veterans like Bakhtiari, Aaron Jones, Devondre Campbell, how much early belief is they can still go in and compete in the division, continuing to be a very young team?
I think this is a team that still is very confident that they will be, in the discussion for the postseason and beyond. Again, this is a team that really thought that they should have at least made a run to the Super Bowl. They thought they should have beat a San Francisco Niners team that they had a good shot against, but they couldn't get it done. So they've learned from that freshman year under Jordan Love, and what they've really done this offseason is retool. Yes, they lost David Bakhtiari, but yes, they do still have 5 capable big bodies from the guys that they had within, and also bringing in the draft Andre Dillard, another veteran that they signed as well to protect Jordan Love. And then you had Aaron Jones, who departed, which I will say this though, Ahmad, you guys will really enjoy him in Minneapolis. He's a great human and a great running back, but you lose him. You bring in Josh Jacobs. So, you bring in guys that can replace the talent, not necessarily the culture, not yet at least, but you bring in Josh Jacobs, who's a very capable running back, to kind of be RB1. They draft Marshawn Lloyd, who, by all accounts said, I believe I'm the best running back in the draft. And, he comes in, and I think his, future for Green Bay will to essentially assume that Aaron Jones role whenever he's capable of doing that. So they bring in pieces there. And while they did lose some high character veterans veteran players. They do have a lot of guys internally who they believe can help this team get over the hump. And while we saw a lot of progression with their offense, and again, they bring in Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon still at running back, that defense was really the biggest question mark for them last season. And they bring in a lot of good defensive players as well. Edgerrin Cooper, a linebacker, has a really good chance to start. Javon Bowler, the safety from Georgia, really good chance to start. So this team is used to playing young rookie players and getting the most out of them. So I don't see that not continuing at all this season. I think there's going to be a lot of extra young players kind of just getting their feet wet in the NFL, but learning from those year two guys who are considered veterans in the locker room, which is just a different dynamic in Green Bay than it has been in years past. So while they did lose a lot of good veteran talent, good guys in the locker room, they have enough players to really retool this team to stay in that Super Bowl hunt. And that's what this team is really excited about this season.
Dan, the Lions are the team to beat in the division after making it to the NFC Championship. You just said it, they were 30 minutes away from the Super Bowl. Do you still feel like after the draft, they're the team to beat?
Well, I think, like I said, I think this is going to be a really good division. And I think we got a good taste of that last year when we saw, look, Minnesota took us to the wire in a game where we could clinch with a backup quarterback. And Chicago, we saw the way that they ended the season. Green Bay came in on Thanksgiving Day and just handed us our hats. So I think there's nothing but respect for these other teams in the division. Everybody in Detroit saw how teams got better in this division as well. But I think there is confidence about this team, and I think that confidence is born out of the fact that there were a lot of young players that led the way for this team last year that theoretically should only be getting better. That is a different world for us to be in Detroit. For a long time, we didn't have young, developing players fueling any success that we had. It was guys that you signed as free agents or guys that you got through a trade or some other way. This is a different world. This is a depth chart that is now dotted by guys that were drafted by the Lions, developed by the Lions, and theoretically should be improving with the Lions. So, yeah, I think probably if you ask somebody, Detroit would be the team to beat, but anybody who gets anything in this division is going to have to go out there and earn it. What the Lions did last year isn't going to get them anything on opening night of 2024. So I really believe this is going to be a tough ride. I think the Lions are well equipped, but everything you do, you're going to have to earn, and everything you get, you're going to have to get it like you got it last year, which is to go out there, not make mistakes, and play. If you look at that game against San Francisco, first 30 minutes was the way the Lions played for a lot of this season. The last 30 minutes was the way they didn't play for much of the season, making mistakes, turning the ball over, and that was their kryptonite. There was no way they were going to overcome that. So, cautionary tale there, sure, but something to learn from for a lot of these guys too. So I think there's a lot of excitement here for the first time in a long time about what this team can be, but also an understanding of what this division is, and that tempers it very quickly.
Yeah, Ahmad, I want to go to you and ask, do you think the NFC North is now the best division in the NFL?
I'm biased because I work here, so yeah, I'm going to say
Hope
the
so.
NFC North is the best division. But when you look around the landscape of the NFC North, I mean, you have Jordan Love, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's really young. You have Caleb Williams in Chicago, who will probably be one of the best quarterbacks in this division. And then you also look at Jared Goff, who just did what he did this past season. The Vikings have their work cut out for them. And if J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold can live up to just some lofty expectations that fans have placed on them here, you really have to look at the North as being like the cornerstone of the NFL for competitive teams all around the board, because it's not just offensively, they're competitive defensively as well. And I think they're kind of setting the standard for what a division should look like from top to bottom. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this upcoming season. It's going to be some fun matchups, some fun divisional matchups, and the Vikings will have their work cut out for them. That's for sure.
Yeah, you were talking about the offense, because I feel like right now in Chicago, we're all focusing on the fact that Caleb Williams is here. He now has Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, you name all the weapons. But they still have a defense that was playing pretty darn good towards the second half of the season last year. They bring back Montez Sweat. Jalen Johnson signs a long-term deal. That is all supposed to roll over into next season and complement now what should hopefully be an explosive offense. All right, I was looking at some graphic of each star's starting offense for each team. So we got the Lions with Goff, Gibbs, St. Brown, Williams, Laporta. The Packers have Love, Jacobs, Watson, Reed, Dobbs. Vikings, we could go McCarthy, or you could also go Darnold, Jones, Jefferson, Addison, and Hockenson. And then Bears with Williams, Allen, Moore, Odunze, and Swift. Lily, do you think Jordan Love is the best quarterback in the division, or who do you think is?
Again, we're biased here, right, in Wisconsin, so we're going to say yes, Jordan Love, but it's hard to say if he will end up being the best quarterback when all is said and done after this season. Jared Goff is a veteran. He played such good football for Detroit. He led this team almost to a Super Bowl. Jordan Love, again, it was his first year as a starter. What he did was remarkable. I mean, he brings his team to the divisional round of the playoffs. I think when we were talking earlier in the year, just getting them in the playoffs was going to be the bar for Jordan Love, and he far surpassed that. But what will J.J. McCarthy look like? What will Caleb Williams look like? Maybe that'll change the narrative thus far, but when you kind of look at the body of work so far from Jordan Love, I mean, we in Wisconsin are going to say he's the best quarterback in the NFC North, but that's not to discount anybody else in the division because they're all still really talented players. But I think what Green Bay fans love is that there really wasn't, there was like maybe 5 or 6 weeks of uncertainty at the quarterback position, and then they found their guy in Jordan Love, right? And now it's just going to be interesting to say, okay, there's a good quarterback in Green Bay, there's a good quarterback in Detroit, and now we have good quarterbacks in Minneapolis and also in Chicago. So it's going to be a stacked league, but I think us here in Wisconsin, we love Jordan, but I don't think it's fair to say he's the quote-unquote best so far right now when all is said and done because we don't know what these other guys can really do yet.
And obviously Caleb Williams walks in.
She's just being humble, that's all.
yeah, all Packers fans are so humble. Caleb Williams walks in and people in Chicago think he's going to be the best quarterback in the division, although he hasn't truly proven anything yet in the NFL. But he talked about the expectations that he wears and how they just simply do not affect him whatsoever. And he credits to all the people that he surrounds himself with since he was back in high school and decided, hey, I want to be a quarterback. I want to take this thing really seriously. And he said also, he talks about the expectations that he puts on himself and wanting to win 8 Super Bowls. And he said, why duck all this smoke? He's like, bring it on. That's something that I really have appreciated about Caleb Williams throughout this entire draft process is that he has owned up to the spotlight. I think he embraces it. He knows how to play into it, and he knows that it comes with the quarterback territory and being a franchise QB in the NFL. And so it's part of the job, and I think he secretly loves that part of it. All right, wrapping this up, I want to go around quickly. I want to get a grade from each of you on how your team did. Dan, I'll start with you.
Oh, look, A. I don't know. I mean, look, I think it is difficult to grade a draft. I love what they did. I love getting 2 corners for all the reasons, Cassie, that you just mentioned. All the offensive weapons that are in this division, you've got to be able to play some defense. And they're now better equipped to do that than they have been in the past. Now, look, Arnold, Rakestraw, they have to prove that they can play at this level, just like these other young players that we're talking about, young quarterbacks, young cornerbacks, all of them have to prove that they can play. I have no problem with what they did. So Brad Holmes, based on his first 3 drafts and the way that he's replenished the stock here in Detroit and put that depth chart together, I'd be foolish to give him anything other than an A, and I'll downgrade him later if I have to.
All right, Lily and Ahmad, I'll start with you, Lily. Only one word.
I'm going to say good. Again, just kind of going off what Dan said, it's kind of hard to really grade your draft class. Maybe ask us in 2-3 years how they do, but just based off of what Brian Gutekunst, their GM, was able to do the last 2 seasons, he was just hitting home runs after home runs out of the park in terms of who he drafted. If you look at last year's class, 11 of the 13 rookies played a significant part on this team's success last year, so it's safe to say, why not have it happen again this year? And when you're looking at the positions of need, Brian Gutekunst really went down the line there and said, we're going to check this box, we're going to check this box, we're going to check this box. And they did that. Offensive line, safety, linebacker, quarterback. They got a running back as well. So he really, in my opinion, hit it out of the ballpark in terms of what this Packers team needed to succeed. And in terms of getting guys who are ready to start in the NFL, I believe they got those guys on the defensive side of the football as well. So I'm going to give it an A for the draft in terms of bringing in guys that they needed to help this team compete. But again, we will see if that does indeed translate into good play on the field this season.
All right, Ahmad, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we are out of time. I'm going to guess you're going to give the Vikings an A too, and I'll give the Bears an A. I'm Cassie Carlson for Dan Miller, Lily Zhao, and Ahmad Hicks. Thanks for joining us for First and North. We'll see you next time.